Hey everybody, this is a piece or a series of pieces, I can't quite tell, that are labeled the quote, Orthodox Defense of the Soviet Union in Practice. The footnote says the first part is abridged from an unsigned article on labor action from May 5th, 1941, and this part 2 is from Labor Action, July 14th, 1941, from Shamefacedness to Solid Brass by Paul Temple, which was the pen name or nom de guerre, or whatever you call it, of Hal Draper. And then there's a third piece from Labor Action from August 4th, 1941, titled Explanation Please by Max Shachtman. So it's three different pieces by perhaps three different authors. The first piece may be from any author. It's an unsigned. Might be one of the other two, though. So yeah, this section, these three pieces together are titled by Matgamna, the quote, Orthodox Defense of the Soviet Union in Practice. So the first one, abridged unsigned article in Labor Action, May 5th, 1941. The Canaanite press has been fairly devoid of agitation to defend the Soviet Union. This would not be so startling were it not for the fact that the defense of the Soviet Union in this war is supposed to be one of the leading slogans of the Socialist Workers' Party, which is the Cannon Party. If not the leading slogan, one would expect a little more attention paid to a slogan of such importance. Emblazoned across the front page occasionally, hammered home in issue after issue, especially inasmuch as the militant, very properly, devotes considerable space to attacking the Stalinists, so much so that a worker picking up an average issue of the paper would hardly get the impression that here is an organization challenging the whole world with its defense of the Soviet Union. Can there be a reason? Can it be perhaps that some, let us say, trade union elements might have judged the slogan a little inappropriate to present-day needs? P.S. When the Canaanites tried to enter the Stalinist May Day parade, they brought with them a proposal that, quote, defend the Soviet Union, be included in the slogans of the parade. This, they explained lamely in the current issue of The Militant, was to put the Stalinists on the spot. But in the same issue, there's printed a May Day manifesto. We looked in vain for the slogan, defend the Soviet Union. Good enough to propose to the Stalinist May Day parade. Not good enough to include in their own manifesto. How come? ? Alright, and this is 2. And this is from Labor Action, July 14th, 1941, from a piece titled From Shamefacedness to Solid Brass by Paul Temple, which is the alias of Hal Draper. Those very principled people, the Socialist Workers' Party, Canaanites, have rediscovered the, quote, defense of the Soviet Union, end quote. This event occurs under very happy auspices for them. While Russia was busy grabbing Poland and Finland, they were also for its defense, but not so happily. The masses of people, not to speak of Churchill, Sumner Welles, and Alexander Kerensky, were quite annoyed with Stalin in those days, so the principled Canaanites kept their slogan under their hats. In their public press, they merely called the invasions a, quote, crime, and, quote, de-emphasized the defense angle, to the extent of mentioning it practically only in internal argumentations and theses. As recent as their May Day manifesto, there was hardly a peep, in public, where somebody might hear them, from the Socialist Workers' Party on this paramount task of, quote, defending the Soviet Union. After all, it was so unpopular. Now the, quote, shamefaced defenses of yesterday splashed the headline, quote, defend the Soviet Union, across the first page of The Militant and boldly write, quote, German imperialism seeks to overthrow the October Revolution and restore the capitalist system in its degenerate fascist form. This is the essential meaning of Hitler's attack on the Soviet Union, ... Defend the Soviet Union at all costs and under all circumstances against imperialist attack. Defend the Soviet Union at all costs and under all circumstances against imperialist attack. As if, quote, the politics of which this war is the continuation, end quote, is Hitler's desire to abolish nationalized property in Russia, rather than his very real desire to gain Russian resources to prosecute his war against Britain. The manifesto throughout is blind enough to speak as if Hitler's invasion is itself his goal, instead of a means to an end. The militant, in addition, prints a 10-year-old quotation from Trotsky calling for the defense of the Soviet Union as, quote, the main fortress of the world proletariat, end quote. James Buchanan himself sends a telegram to Mr. Stalin via Ambassador Oumansky, calling for the release of Trotskyists from GPU jails so that they might, quote, take their proper place in the front ranks of the defenders of the Soviet Union, end quote. Naturally, he brings this up merely as a helpful suggestion, not as a condition for support, since the Canaanites are unconditional defenders of the Soviet Union. In another column, Russia is, quote, this one bastion of socialism, end quote. Shamefacedness being definitely thrown aside, Albert Goldman substitutes solid brass in the next issue of The Militant, July 5th. Believe it or not, he blandly denies that there ever was an alliance between Hitler and Stalin, denies that the Canaanites ever said there was such an alliance, and remarks that the expression, quote, Berlin-Moscow axis, end quote, was used only by middle-class Democrats and the Workers' Party. For outright forgery, this is equaled only by the Stalinists. We have room for only two examples. A. One of Cannon's rare literary works, an article in the Socialist Appeal of September 29, 1939, denouncing, quote, the joint policy of Stalin and his Axis partner, Hitler, end quote, and stating that, quote, the pact of Stalin and Hitler is in fact a military alliance, end quote. B. The article by Trotsky in Liberty of January 27, 1940, if anything, goes further, saying that Russia attacked Poland and Finland at Germany's behest. Goldman explains the Hitler-Stalin pact today solely on the basis of Stalin's desire to avoid war and to strengthen his military position against Germany by taking over adjacent lands. This is a belated plagiarism from the Daily Worker. No alliance with Hitler, only a policy of peace and the defense of the Soviet Union. Like Churchill, Goldman, too, criticised the Kremlin while calling for its defense. Goldman attacks our own stand by asking, apparently seriously, if it is true, as the Workers' Party claimed, that Hitler and Stalin were partners, how come one partner attacked the other? Quote, for if one claims that such a close partnership existed between Stalin and Hitler, then the fact that Hitler found himself in trouble need not and would not lead to his attacking the Soviet Union, end quote. And he positively, belligerently asks us to explain how, quote, such an unusual change in imperialist partnerships, end quote, is possible. Of course, France changed partners, he admits, but that was because it was defeated, adopting its conqueror as partner. His memory being what it is, he forgets that Finland has changed partners too, this time not with its conqueror. In fact, there is hardly a country in the war that has not changed partners at least once. If Japan decides to pull out of the Axis in the event of successes by London, Washington, Moscow, Goldman will no doubt again be astonished at imperialist trickery, provided he doesn't deny that there was ever a Berlin-Tokyo axis. Two more notes on the Socialist Workers' Party position. 1. We have said that the Canaanites are now very brash about proclaiming the, quote, defense of the Soviet Union, end quote. But so far they have presented this slogan in a manner completely empty of any concrete meaning. Are they in favor of rendering, quote, material and moral support to the Soviet Union, end quote, by American workers? So far, they have indicated only that that's all right for the Russian Trotskyists, not a word to American workers on the subject. Their manifesto has only one sentence on the question of what to do. Quote, the method to defend the Soviet Union is to continue the class struggle against the imperialists, end quote. If this is all the, quote, defense of the Soviet Union, end quote, means in practice, in this war, it should be made unmistakably clear. But it is not, as the CP can point out to them. 2. The militant appeals to the members of the Communist Party as follows, quote, you set the defense of the Soviet Union as your first task. We do likewise. On that basis, we appeal to you to give sober consideration to the grave problems of this defense, ... end quote. Follows injunction to continue the struggle against capitalism and the war, and then, quote, this is the only real defense of the Soviet Union, and in this defense we stand ready to join you in any action that will advance our common cause, end quote. Since the defense of the Soviet Union is, quote, the first task, end quote, of the Socialist Workers' Party, here, in the United States, as Roosevelt drives into the war, and since this is a, quote, common cause, end quote, with the Stalinists, We presume that the Socialist Workers' Party will immediately start a campaign for a united front with the Communist Party to render material and moral aid to the Soviet Union, ... Or will Cannon wait till the Communist Party becomes more popular? If defense of Russia is the, quote, first task, end quote, naturally everything else must be subordinated to it. In this connection, we note that the militant has so far kept mum about the question of aid to Russia by the Roosevelt government. This may be an oversight, a pretty big oversight, but in any case it behooves the Socialist Workers' Party to make clear the Socialist Workers' Party's own attitude as well as specify what the defense of Russia means to it outside of literary exercises. Okay, and this is part 3, which was from Labor Action, August 4th, 1941. Explanation, Please, by Max Shachtman. In the pages of The Militant, organ of the Socialist Workers' Party, Albert Goldman has devoted more than a column to attacks on the position of our party, particularly with reference to the Soviet Union in the war, and explanations of the position of his party on the same question. According to Goldman, the inside reason why our party took a position against the, quote, defense of the Soviet Union, end quote, during the period of the Hitler-Stalin Pact was because Stalin made the pact with a fascist imperialism instead of with a democratic imperialism, and we, collapsing under the pressure of the democratic bourgeois patriots, shied away from defending an ally of a fascist power. However, Goldman and his friends predicted, if Stalin were to make a pact with a democratic imperialism, which would not be displeasing to our democratic bourgeoisie and its apologists, we would turn about face and become proponents of Soviet defensism. The theoretician of the Socialist Workers' Party even wrote recently in its magazine that we were becoming defenders of American imperialism. Like other Cannonite predictions about us, this one too has proved to be slanderous and more than a little stupid. But let that pass for the moment, since we are presently interested in something else. What we'd like is an explanation, please. This is what perplexes us. In The Militant of July 12th, Felix Mara writes, quote, of course the Soviet government could have rejected Stalin's offer as of a pact in 1939. The Stalinist hirelings kept asserting, in the few days intervening between the pact and the outbreak of the Second World War, that the pact was bringing peace and was a blow at the Axis. Fantastic gibberish, but they had to say something. But Stalin knew perfectly well that the pact was a go-ahead signal to Hitler, ensuring him against an Eastern Front. Quote, could the Soviet government have declined such a proposal, end quote? Stalin now smirkingly asks. Yes, it had the elementary duty to decline, in order not to give Hitler a free hand. Nor is this hindsight on our part. We denounced the pact in precisely these terms at the time it was signed, end quote. Now, that's a lot of malarkey for the simple reason that neither Morrow nor his colleagues ever denounced the pact, quote, in precisely these terms, end quote, or in any terms of recognizable similarity. Morrow cannot quote a single example to justify his remarkably tardy audacity. But let's let this pass, too, merely as proof that a man doesn't forget everything he learns in the Stalin School of Journalism, and proceed with what's disturbing us. The explanation. In the issue of The Militant a week after Morrow's article, Michael Court has an article too. This Court is a specialist on imperialism, Soviet policy and pacts, and on the side he runs a funny column where he makes the most convulsing cracks about our party. He evidently does not read Morrow, so he writes, quote, it is entirely correct for the Soviet Union to take advantage of conflicts among the imperialists. It is correct for the Soviet Union now to ally itself with capitalist opponents of Germany. Sad necessity. The weakness of the USSR demands it. It is false and criminal, however, for the Stalinist bureaucracy to pay off its capitalist allies by stifling the class struggle within their borders, end quote. Michael Court. But has Stalin ever made, or is he capable of ever making, an alliance with a capitalist power which does not, by its very essence, stifle the class struggle in the camp of the ally? In other words, has the criminal bureaucracy made, or can it make, an alliance which is not, quote, false and criminal, end quote? How can it be correct to make an alliance that is sure to be, quote, false and criminal, end quote? How can it be correct to make an alliance that is sure to be, quote, false and criminal, end quote? Explanation, please. Then there are a few other questions while we still have the floor. Was the pact with Hitler wrong because it was made with nasty fascist imperialists? Whereas the pact with Churchill is okay because it is made with democratic imperialists who speak with such a nice Oxford accent. Was the pact with Hitler wrong just because the Stalinists claimed it, quote, was bringing peace and was a blow at the Axis, end quote, as Morrow puts it? But don't they make the same claim for the pact with Churchill and Roosevelt? The pact that is, quote, correct, end quote, as Court puts it? Was the pact with Germany wrong just because it gave Hitler the, quote, go-ahead signal, ... ensuring him against an Eastern Front, end quote? Is the pact with Churchill correct because it gives British imperialism the go-ahead signal for attacks on Germany and ensures that the latter does have an Eastern Front? Was the pact with Germany wrong because it, quote, made possible the subjugation of Europe by Hitler, end quote, as Morrow writes? Is the pact with British imperialism correct because it will make possible the, shall we say, emancipation of Europe by Churchill? Is the pact with England correct because it helps Stalin, quote, defend nationalized property, end quote, from imperialist attack? Then wasn't the pact with Hitler also correct, since it yielded new military outposts, Poland, Estonia, Finland, etc., to the Soviet Union, which would also help Stalin, quote, defend nationalized property, end quote? Was the pact with Hitler wrong because it was, quote, a terrible blow to the workers, anti-fascist sentiments, end quote? Whereas the pact with British imperialism is correct because it is less offensive to those many workers who are for Britain's victory. Would then the slogan of quote, defend the Soviet Union, end quote, have been wrong when Stalin invaded Poland or Finland with Hitler's support and thereby also struck a, quote, terrible blow, end quote, at the anti-fascist sentiments of the workers? Who is right, Morrow or Court, or neither of them? Or perhaps there is something to be said for both of them. Why do we ask Goldman? Because he has at least two qualifications. He admits that we are middle-class idealists, while he is a revolutionary, Marxian materialist. In addition, the militant announces Goldman as the, quote, attorney for the Socialist Workers' Party, end quote. We cannot honestly swear to the first claim, but will vouch for the second. He surely is the attorney of the Socialist Workers' Party. So, we'll take a gloomy chance on him answering the questions, although our experience has been pretty gloomy. The end. Thanks for listening.